Hello and welcome to the Nine Sports Podcast Women's Basketball Edition. I'm Howard Megdal,
And I'm Jackie Powell.
and we are here to bring you, as ever, detailed, in-depth women's basketball analysis. Again, we are part of the Nine Sports Podcast Network. Make sure you are also tuning in to our women's soccer podcast from Kathleen Geyer, our women's hockey podcast from Maya Smith, and our women's college basketball podcast. Michael and Melissa do such a great job bringing on interviews. We had Adia Barnes just this week from SMU. Make sure you're also subscribing to Women's Sports Daily, 5 minutes every weekday morning on the most important parts of the women's sports reporting landscape. I listen while I have my first cup of coffee in the morning. We are here today to talk about some real world effects and changes in what is happening in the WNBA relative to player security. So we've got one big segment on it, and we're going to start out with number one at the nine with Jackie Powell to get you a sense of what's the latest, but one of many things that we are seeing as they relate to this security. So I'm going to put the clock up, and Jackie, you be ready. I've got the gong ready for you as well. 60 seconds. What's the latest thing that happened?
So, after the Indiana Fever played the Las Vegas Aces on NBC's first edition of Sunday Night Basketball, Aces point guard Chelsea Gray got a disturbing message from someone on Instagram that included a racial slur. And once again, the issue of online harassment is plaguing WNBA players and their safety. We saw this with Alyssa Thomas and DeWanna Bonner, but we did not see a specific example. And Gray, she took matters into her own hands and posted the screenshot to her Instagram, which sent WNBA fans into full mobilization mode. Gray showed the user's Instagram handle in her screenshot on her story, and that allowed people to take to Instagram and then find the person's LinkedIn page, and then this person was fired from their job.
With 3 seconds to spare. I'm glad you laid that out, Jackie, and I'm glad that we're talking about this. And so there are a few things we need to get into. We need to get into what the WNBA at the team and league and even player level, what everyone is already doing. We need to get to where the disconnect is, and we are going to present, and this does not come from just us, to be clear, but this comes from my having spoken to a dozen folks across the league, players and teams and the league and player agents as well, about how do we fix what is clearly a broad disconnect between what is being done, as you'll soon see, and for everyone to feel positively about what is being done. And let's also just be real about it. We're going to talk about the things that cannot be done, the realities that cannot change. And so I want to start, there are two things at the top of this for me as they relate to the Chelsea Gray incident in particular. And here's the first one. This is not one fan base or another fan base that is supercharging what is happening. I have spoken to players across this league on many different teams who are routinely getting threats, who are routinely hearing these threats. Sports gambling is central to this. And so let's just zoom out a little bit. And so we understand this is something that NBA players face. This is something that Major League Baseball players face. This is a repeated problem, and we'll get to one such solution that I think helps stem the tide. None of these solutions are silver bullets, but it's really important to understand a duality to that dynamic. The number one, that this is real. This is really happening, and it is going to happen more to WNBA players by definition. That a league that is overwhelmingly Black women is going to face more abuse. I can't really believe that I need to make that point. The idea that, of course, in this moment, that you're going to see a league of women and a league of majority Black women face
And
more
queer
abuse,
women too.
and queer women too. But you're going to continue to see it. And so that doesn't change the fact that there are ways to address it. And let's just be clear, ways that it is already being addressed by the league. But it does mean that it is obviously amplified to a greater extent.
What I think is interesting, and so Howard and I have discussed this a lot in addition to the reporting that he did in the past couple of days. And we actually have a proposed plan that we're going to show everyone. And the betting is part of it. But what I do want to say also is Breanna Stewart was recently asked on Candace Parker's show Post Moves, and she got a fan question that I think is really interesting and explains a lot of what's going on right now.
Yeah.
So I just want to quickly play this to also continue to pull back the curtain on what we're about to discuss. So this is Breanna Stewart answering a question on Candace Parker's podcast Post Moves.
Amber James, the WNBA is growing faster than ever. What do you think is still the biggest issue that fans don't see players dealing with behind the scenes?
The biggest issue, I think that the biggest issue that fans probably don't see or don't realize is happening is like the level of security, like the security issue behind things. I think that, you see it in big instances, right? You see it when you hear about like AT and DB and like the stuff that they're kind of getting, but it's like, it's happening to all players. And I feel like with the betting and the parlays and all this stuff, you just have to be a little bit careful, a little bit more careful, a little bit more not in real time, whether you're out and about or you're with your family, just in case. So I think that all players are kind of learning that on the fly, is like realizing the sense of security and the eyes and awareness that we have on us is bigger than it ever was.
Came right from a player herself.
And again, so to go back to this, right? What are the things we know? This is a universal experience. It is a horrific but universal experience, and so that is a given. What else is a given, though? We are seeing, and I spoke to folks within the players themselves and those representing them who talked about, and just to be clear, these are not regular defenders of the WNBA. But there was a universal belief that the WNBA does a lot, that when threats are reported, they are escalated, there is a push forward on it. There's not a profound lack of unhappiness with the actual actions that are being taken at the team or the league level, which is fascinating, right? So let me give you one such example of reporting that we haven't heard yet. When the league put forward their anti-hate initiative a couple of years ago, and we've talked about this on the show.
No space for hate.
Space for hate. Thank you. Yes. So within No Space for Hate, there is technology that is provided to the players that allows for effectively monitoring of social media accounts. And it allows for, in some cases, players to never encounter that particular hatred. The vendor used by the league is not the only vendor who does this. There are multiple people out there in the space who are operating that way. And these are fundamentally important elements that can keep players from facing this hatred. Because again, and we've talked about this as well, it absolutely cannot, should not be. Players can either choose to disengage from social media and lose brand opportunities, or be part of social media and say, well, getting threats is just the price of doing business. Neither one is or should be an acceptable solution if there are other ways to handle it. A couple of problems with this. A lot of players have not chosen to add this technology to their own social media. And I've talked to multiple folks around the league about this. One reason is that players are simply have privacy concerns about giving access to their social media and their DMs to another company. And so they're worried about doing that. there are solutions that I've heard that are things like, look, if players do not want personal messages to be monitored by the league, to simply have a social media account that is professional and a social media account that's personal. And that is a distinction that a lot of people have made in many other businesses. It seems probably more important for professional athletes to do that in the public eye than some other folks. So that is one such solution. Another, and this is just what one person put it to me, Twitter is by far the biggest driver of these threats. And Twitter is not something that actually helps people build their own brands. So the way one person who's familiar with this put it to me is, I don't know why any player is on Twitter at all, which is its own set of conversations and subset of conversation. But all of which is to say,
What's interesting,
the league can't force people to uptake this. The league does need to provide the ability to do that. And we'll get into what that plan looks like.
Howard, it's interesting because what you just said reminded me of this idea of how the WNBA is where it is. And it's in large part because of social media and because of these platforms and the fact that you have athletes that are able to interact with some of their fans. But clearly, this has gone to such a level where it's not even fans that are interacting with athletes, which is what I think you were alluding to before. And so something I've noticed is that there aren't as many players on X as there used to be. A lot of them are now on Threads and Instagram, and those two are owned by Meta, that technology company, which has a slew of issues itself.
It's not necessarily the solution. And, certainly, again, that monitoring software, as I understand, can operate across all of these social media channels, just to be clear.
That's an important point to note.
It is. But so again, you go back to, there's an issue of trust here, right? So much of this comes down to, if parties involved trust each other, you're able to understand it. And then conspiracy theories love a vacuum, right?
Right.
Which we get to.
Yes, before we get into talking about the disconnect and the plan we've proposed, I do think what we need to, I guess, explain a little bit more is what the security efforts look like right now.
Sure.
And so, right. So I know you have one, I have one as well.
You start.
So again, I guess Breanna Stewart she remains a good example of things. It might just be because she's very good at speaking about many different issues in this league. But recently, I think it was on July 7th, Stewie did a shoot around availability, and she was asked amongst a group of reporters about security and sort of when she noticed a shift in it and what sort of the process looks like for her. So when she got to New York in 2023, that is when she noticed a real shift and a change. Just want to note that, Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark didn't make it to the league until 2024. So this stuff was beginning to happen prior.
Well, I just want to point out something else that one player agent said to me, which is this dates back 30 years, that there have been prominent players in the WNBA. And let's be clear about this too, not just threats on social media, but stalking players. This is a thing that we have seen that Caitlin Clark has dealt with, that Angel Reese has dealt with, that Paige Beckers has dealt with, among many others. And this goes back to the origins of the league. There's multiple facets to it now, and there's an ability for anyone, anywhere to be taking threatening actions against players. But so this is a long time in coming. But your point about this, as it relates to Stewie, which is fundamental, is Stewie goes to the team. The team is very proactive in responding.
Yes.
The team and the league are given high marks privately for the ways in which they respond. So again, this goes back to a gap. And where does that gap come from? It comes from, in large part, the communication of those efforts.
Yes, which is part of our multi-pronged plan.
Yeah.
But before we get to that, I just want to say what you were saying about Stewie is when she was asked about the process, I just want to lay this out more
Please.
clearly here.
Yes.
So if there is any sort of online abuse, a threatening email, anything, what Stewie does is it's either she goes right to anyone at the Liberty, or she goes right to her wife, Marta, who then goes to the head of security at the Liberty and the Nets. This man is named Fred. And then from there, Fred takes care of it. And as we know, there are high security apparatuses for MNBA players. And so when you have teams that have shared ownership, it makes sense that you have the same security person for both.
And the NBA has been dealing with this for a very long time and has that process in place, but it's a very quiet process. And that leaves fans to wonder, well, gee, is anything being done at all?
So maybe that's why. That's why there's this issue on the W side, because you also have WNBA players that are experiencing this for the first time, and because WNBA players are women and queer and are more marginalized.
I think it's more complicated than just that's why. But we'll get into the plan. Let's let people see what our options are, what we're trying. And again, I want to stress this is a plan. I have spoken to a dozen folks in every area, at the league level, at the team level, at the player level, at the player agent level, to get a sense of where's the commonalities. And the commonalities are very, very obvious across the board.
All right. Drum roll, please. Is there a drum roll? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay, that'll do.
Yes. Here's our proposed...
More bongo than drum set, but we'll take it.
Yes, we will. Here is our proposed security plan. So...
All right. Let me take everybody through it if I can.
Sure.
Okay? All right. Centralized Threat Assessment Office. The WNBA hires somebody, and it is a public-facing somebody, a full-time hire to do the following. There is immediate coordination with team and league. So when these things happen, instead of them being dealt with, a lot of times they're dealt with at the team level, and it doesn't even rise to the level of the league on top of it. There is a clear understanding of everything that is going on, fully reported, Grand Central Station for this information, which also serves as a direct hotline for players. If players are feeling like they need to talk directly to the league about something that is happening, the players are able to reach out as well. This is a hire who will report directly to the commissioner. And this is also a person that therefore that person's full-time job is response. So making sure that people understand within all of the stakeholders, players and teams, and frankly, front offices and player agents, here's what we're doing, here's how we are doing it. There's nothing lost in the messaging. There's nothing that gets lost in text messages. It is clear. This is the person who you talk to. Updating social media technology. So I want to speak to this. I spoke to a couple of players who do utilize the No Space for Hate. And the general consensus here is it works. It doesn't work quite as well as it did last year, but it is here. So now the question is, what are they doing at a league level to make sure that the technology is fully updated? Because as we all know, today's tech solution is tomorrow's utterly irrelevant technology that's been outdated, right? So those things need to change.
Can I ask you about that, Howard,
Please.
quickly, just to help clarify things?
Yeah.
would that person who is hired and reports directly to the commissioner, would that person also be tasked with researching the updated technology software?
Correct. This is a security first hire. And this would be a person to convey that to everyone involved. But yes, this is somebody who has to stay on top of it. There are all the time new opportunities to work with different vendors who are working on solutions to this, and the solutions have to stay proactive because the technology is, there's always, the workaround is always presumably at or ahead of the technology that's in place. So we can go back to the plan. That is significant. That is an important part of the job. This is not as much for the person who is hired, and the next two are probably neither is to the person who's hired.
Yeah.
Although the second one, this person needs to be able to be public facing, but there needs to be an end to player prop bets. And I will just say, this is not a WNBA issue, but I think it is a more amplified WNBA issue, which is to say players in every major sports league I have covered or currently cover are dealing with this. This is happening again and again and again. And leave aside that from a gambling perspective, you are asking for a gambling scandal by having player prop bets exist anyway. You are also putting your players in danger by having player prop bets exist. And you are putting a league of marginalized people in greater danger because of the very nature of who makes up this league. So they need to end.
Yeah.
They need to end. And let's just go and let's underscore this once again. Why did Chelsea Gray get threatened? What do we know? We know that this was somebody who, as near as we can tell, doesn't have a tie to any particular team fan base. What is the commonality here? The commonality here is this was somebody who was deeply involved in sports betting. And that is the commonality. Anyone who likes to cast blame on one or another, some sort of fandom, obviously like the Indiana Fever get talked about a lot. And to me,
because they brought a lot of people in.
But people are confusing these two things. Zoom out for even a second into where we are in sports here in 2026. Prop bets and the abuse that comes from sports gambling writ large. I don't know why people are afraid to say this with their full chest, but that's where we're at. That is a significant part of the problem that is supercharging the issues that we're talking about here. So let's just go back to the last part of this, because the last part of it might be the most important part.
Yes, and we both have thoughts on this. So yes, the final part.
Yeah, go ahead.
A large proactive PR push. And so, Howard, explain exactly what that means, and then I will add on there.
All the things we've talked about here today, about ways in which players are talking to teams, talking to the league, both are super responsive. There is a general feeling of positivity around that element of it from the stakeholders involved. Nobody knows about that. Nobody knows anything about that. I would say to you, think about the difference, even with the current setup in place. If the WNBA had reached out to trusted reporter or reporters with a full briefing on, here are all the things we are doing. Here's what No Space for Hate looks like in 2026. And then why do you do that? You do that in part so that the players understand everything that's at their disposal and understand the element of even the supporting technology they can install on their social media apps in order to protect themselves, and have that fully explained. And everyone kind of passes the buck on that, right? Oh, well, why doesn't the WNBPA get more involved in making that clear? They probably should, but what can the league do on this front? But then when the threats happen, and let's just be real about this in 2026, the WNBA cannot prevent violent threats from coming to players. Can't do it. Because no one can control that right now at anything less than a fundamental national and probably international regulation of social media. That doesn't mean, you throw up your hands and say, well, there's nothing that can be done. But you say, all right, this is going to happen. If you know this is going to happen, you get ahead of it.
Yeah.
And I don't mean you get ahead of it just so you look good from a PR perspective. You get ahead of it so that players understand this, so that fans understand this. Why did every fan jump in to try and fix this for Chelsea Gray? Because there was a broad belief among the fan base that, WNBA is not doing anything. And I don't blame the fans for that. They don't know, they didn't hear. And if you're the WNBA, when this thing goes down, but you've done this proactive effort in April to talk to reporters and have that out there, not only can you be quick with a response to say how much you take this seriously, you can again point every single reporter every single time, look at the laundry list of the things we're doing.
And so this is what Stewie was saying, right? She was asked point blank by a fan, what is one thing that fans, don't really know about when it comes to an issue within the WNBA? And what did she say? She said security, because the league has not been very forthcoming besides us knowing that no space for hate exists. And so this does not mean, I remember in 2025 when the league was publicizing this and when players wore shirts that said no space for hate. And when there was a message from Kathy Engelbert at each and every game, to be clear, I no longer see those messages. At one point, people were sort of making fun of it and saying, oh, this is a meme, no space for hate, blah, 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 blah. And I think what that came from was that it was the tone of the messaging, and maybe it just wasn't enough.
Every message needs to underscore zero tolerance. What can the WNBA do? Can it prevent this from happening? No. Can the WNBA make it very clear? And by the way, this is routinely done in other sports leagues of fan action in the stands are subject to this is like a normal thing.
Well,
that
we do hear that. We hear that when
in game.
Yes.
But but you've got this bigger problem to be able to say every fan who does this will be referred to criminal prosecution as needed and banned from WNBA games for life. So that's what zero tolerance is. It's not just a slogan, no space for hate. It's letting people know. And why does that matter? It matters because it will give players an added sense of protection. Why does it matter? It matters because fans will hear and understand exactly what the consequences are for doing this as well. And again, it reiterates the WNBA, which is already doing this. Takes it seriously.
And Kathy Engelbert.
This understanding that the league is doing this.
And Kathy Engelbert has been thrown under the bus on many different situations in the past week, including her hesitance to. There was a story this week from Tom Friend about Kathy Engelbert not being sure about going forward to suspend Alyssa Thomas. And it was Adam Silver who pushed her to make that call.
According to that reporting, although the league has denied that was the case.
Yes.
And of course, there are numerous versions of that which can be different from Adam called and said, you must do this. It can be a conversation that had. It can be Adam expressing a preference. There's a lot of different ways that can happen. But again, it does go back to this sort of larger question of if, in fact, there was a process that was involved there, why are we hearing about it long after the fact? Where the transparency here is not something that would hurt the league, the lack of transparency. And I'll say this, I've heard a take that I don't agree with, this nonsense that because the NFL isn't in season, that therefore we're ultimately going to get the worst takes by definition. And I just look at, I'm going to just go back to, and we've talked about this, Kathy Engelbert being perceived differently publicly than a Rob Manfred, being perceived differently than other commissioners. And Absolutely. Do I think the standards are different for men and women in positions of leadership? I do. But
Yep.
do I also know, because I just covered the MLB All-Star weekend, that there is this small army of PR folks around to proactively shape messaging for Major League Baseball? I sure do. And they get ahead of things and they are proactive about things. And instead of purely being in response mode, that
Yeah.
is critical. And it's critical here for all the reasons we've just now talked about for the last half hour.
Let me just explain an example of what you mean, Howard, by
Okay,
being
please.
proactive, because I just want listeners to understand what we're talking about. So let's go back to the Commissioner's Cup. And then once I explain this, we will get into a very quick court vision where we're going to take you back in time for a few moments. But let's go back to Commissioner's Cup night. Howard and I are sitting in press row, or we're sitting in pregame press conferences. And what happens? But maybe an hour before, Alyssa Thomas speaks about the lack of communication that she got from the league. And then what happens is, while the game is going on, what happens? But then there is reporting from Alexa Philippou, friend of the show, about, oh no, there was communication from the league and from the commissioner. So that's an example of what I mean, or what we mean by being proactive instead of waiting for that response. I mean, the whole thing with Kathy Engelbert and Adam Silver when it came to the Alyssa Thomas suspension, the fact that the WNBA had to be reactive, they were reacting to something that came out about them. That's what we mean.
It is a huge problem that the league is not first mover on this publicly, and it has real world implications for how the players themselves feel, and that is significant, and it has real world implications for how the league is perceived. That is the bottom line. So this is our effort at a common sense solution to it across the board.
So this is the essence of the proposed plan, and why we think it matters. And this is about proposing or talking about solutions. There's been a lot of chatter of, oh, the WNBA isn't doing anything. They aren't doing enough. Part of it, is we're trying to say, is that not enough people know what it actually is doing.
Much more to come on this.
Now we should talk a little bit of basketball, right? So for Court Vision, as we sign off today, there is a certain player who made a very impressive debut. And it seems as though Howard knew something about this happening. So I'm going to play a little clip.
But here's the thing about Justine Pissott, and if you'll permit me a moment for Tom's River's own Justine Pissott. Where is Tom's River anyway?
Yep, that's in New Jersey.
It is in New Jersey. Oh my God. That's great. Thank you so much for filling me in on that. Justine went to Tennessee originally and simply couldn't find her way into the rotation. She went to Vanderbilt, and she even acknowledged this. And I love this, the maturity of it. She did not play defense well enough, in her view, last year to stay on the court. In Shea Ralph's view, to stay on the court, despite being an elite shooter, 6'4", with just an incredible wingspan that goes along with it. So what did she do? She got back in the gym this summer. She got really strong. And Justine, who was 6'4", who was not just an elite three-point shooter. She's making 44.4% of them, but she's taking 7 per game. So both of those things you're looking for from a player you want to play at the next level. She is defending fives consistently. She is blocking shots. And then the other thing she is doing is she is finding her teammates. Her assist percentage last year, 7.3%, very much like early on Katie Lou Samuelson spot-up shooter. She is what Katie Lou became. She is at 16.4 assist percentage here so far in her senior season. So really a fascinating player. Make sure she's on your.
Yeah, so she was on Becky Hammond's radar, right? So Justine Pissott, in 2 games played, has scored 9.5 points. Her field goal percentage is 58.3, and she's hitting 55.6% of her three-pointers.
I told you she'd be great. I also just have looked into it, and Tom's River is in New Jersey.
Yes. Well,
Hope that's helpful.
It is a small sample size, but the point is she's someone to watch out for. And Howard was the one who told us to be watching out for her. So it seems as though Becky Hammond took some note. Anyway, this is all for us this week on the 9 Sports Podcast Women's Basketball Edition. I'm Jackie Powell.
And I'm Howard Megdal.
And we will see you next week.